Now is the time to become educated God's way in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure in just 8 simple steps.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Join us for a new start every Wednesday at 11:30 a.m. on WOKB 1680 for 8 Steps to Health. Brought to you by Saved to Serve Ministries.
Good morning, Orlando, and welcome back to 8 Steps to Health, brought to you by Save to Serve Ministries. I'm your host, Dwayne Powell.
And your co-host, Hope Powell.
And we're very excited to be here today. We have some great information to share with you today, so please stop whatever you're doing and join us. Get your notepads and your writing utensils. And today, as usual, we have in the studio with some of our team members from Save to Serve Ministries. They're health missionaries who travel around the country teaching health principles from the Bible. So welcome, Jerby, Jared, and Richard.
Good morning.
Greetings.
Every week we are sharing these 8 steps to health, which is based on God's word, the Bible, and we know that the Bible is also our health manual. And we break down these principles using the acronym of NEWSTART. So please tell us, what does NEWSTART stand for?
N stands for nutrition and E stands for exercise.
W for water, S for sunlight, T for temperance.
A stands for air, R for rest, and the last T, trust in God.
And every week since our inception, we have been teaching and singing the NEWSTART theme song. So for our new listeners, learn the song so next week you can sing along with us.
Nutrition,
exercise,
water, sunlight,
temperance,
air and rest,
trust in God.
Nutrition,
exercise,
water, sunlight, temperance, air and rest, trust in God, trust in God, trust in God.
That's right. Trusting God is the foundation of these health principles and the number one prevention for stress.
Amen.
So if you missed any of our previous broadcasts, please visit our website at 8stepstohealth.com. Let me get this website to you correctly. The number 8
right.
steps, the number 2 health.com. We have some great information on our website. We have some great videos on our website. So please visit us. 8stepstohealth.com.
And great recipes.
And recipes as well.
Yes.
Now, we want to reiterate the theme for our show, and that is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And our objective is to become intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure.
And currently, and for the past several weeks, we have been doing a series on understanding the body organs and how they relate to the 8 laws of health. And specifically, we've been speaking about the brain and the issues concerning our frontal lobe and how living in harmony with the 8 laws of health, that NEWSTART acronym, will help both prevent the diseases of the frontal lobe and how to cure the diseases of the frontal lobe. And this is our last week speaking on the frontal lobe, but I pray that our listeners, as we have doing all this research and studying, have learned a lot about the brain, the frontal lobe, and its functions.
All right, just to recap, last week we talked about music and its effect on the frontal lobe, and how few people understand the powerful influence that music has on the brain, which contains the frontal lobe. Music enters the brain through its emotional region, which includes the temporal and limbic system. So it was a very, very good show on music. Please check that out from last week.
And we also talked about depending on the type of music that you listen to, it could either have a positive or negative influence on the brain. Now, music therapists tell us that certain types of music, such as rock with syncopated rhythms, bypass the frontal lobe and thus escape our ability to reason and to make sound judgments about it. Evidence also suggests that music, just like television, can produce a hypnotic effect.
But you just said that it escapes the certain types of music, syncopated is the word you use. It bypasses the frontal lobe and escapes our ability to reason and make judgments. And when we first started the series on the frontal lobe, what does our frontal lobe do? What is the purpose of it?
It's the judgment seat. It's the judgment seat of reason.
Exactly.
Where your intellect, the main portion of intellect.
Exactly.
Yes, and let's not forget about music and how music affects the body, as we're just talking about, because musical rhythms, certain musical rhythms help to synchronize natural biological rhythms, because our bodies, they run on rhythms. It has a rhythm.
Right.
And when you listen to other types of rhythms, it clashes with your body rhythm and it disrupts these internal rhythms. So it is not surprising that since all of our body systems function in rhythm, now that we have to make sure what we listen to. Otherwise, it will affect us negatively. And right now, we want to transition and we want to talk about how to treat the frontal lobe with care. What is our topic? How to treat the frontal lobe with care. And this can be summed up in 7 points, which takes us right back to our acronym of NEWSTART. Right. So let's go through it. Point number 1, protect the frontal lobe from mechanical injury. We're going to talk on that. Number 2, prevent or control underlying diseases that may damage the frontal lobe. Point number 3, give the brain adequate supply of oxygen from the blood. Point number 4, supply the brain with good nutrition. Number 5, get adequate sunlight. Number 6, exercise the brain. And number 7, provide proper inputs by controlling what we see and what we hear.
Amen.
Right. So, Jared, I want to touch on number 1, which you mentioned, which was that mechanical injury. Many may not realize it, but mechanical injury can inflict permanent brain damage. Now, someone may be listening and wondering, well, what do you mean by mechanical injury? Basically, activities that are high risk, like what? Boxing, for one, football, even motorcycle riding, or just to name a few. So if we're talking about boxing here, if you look at how boxing, the whole sport of it is you have those two guys in the ring, right, and they're for hours boxing and hitting each other in the head, in the stomach,
yep.
And the body, even the brain is taking all of this damage, and those tiny blood vessels that are in the brain are being damaged, right? So this can lead to, over time, permanent brain damage.
The ultimate goal in boxing is to knock your opponent
knock him out, to make him unconscious, as it were. That's got
you have to put the brain to sleep, and you do that by punching him.
And it's even worse in football, because when you look at that, all these big guys, they're colliding into one another, and from all different angles, head first, and all these concussions that arise from when these players have these, play the football, and years down the line, they may develop. What are those complications? Parkinson's disease, Muhammad Ali,
and Alzheimer's as well.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of boxers that were in the sport too long, and Muhammad Ali was one of them. He sustained multiple brain concussions, and as a result, Parkinson. Right. Another one is Thomas the Hitman Hearns. You may not remember him, but he was a boxer as well. He can take it,
and give a hit.
He can give a hit.
Yeah.
And Riddick Bowe was another one that suffers from these injuries to the brain.
To the brain. And you mentioned, Richard, football, but let's be clear. When we talk about football, we're talking about American football and Caribbean football, which is soccer. Because even in soccer, they hit the ball with their heads. That's a strong impact to the brain. But we have to share some sport concussion statistics, as though we're speaking on the frontal lobe damage. And we got this article from the Daily Mail, and you can find it on our website. And here are a few statistics. Startling. 3,800,000 concussions were reported in 2012, and that had doubled from 2002. So in that 10-year period. So can we imagine what it is today? And we're in 2018. 33% of all sport concussions happen at practice.
Many may not.
So they're just getting ready for the game. Imagine going into the game where your opponent is in it to win. So they're going to be even more aggressive. And if you watch some practices, whether you're in high school or college, you see these coaches hit them. You got to hit them harder. You know, they're encouraging this aggressive behavior. 47% of all reported sport concussions occur during high school football.
Now, I want to plug in right there because we're talking about high school football in this specific statistic, but also you have middle school football and even peewee football.
Right,
you know, they
ball.
start the kids out young. And, you know, there's articles circulating around the internet where people are saying, hey, we need to stop this, stop tackle football in these little kids because they start young. They're breaking bones. Their bodies are not fully developed. And their brain is not even fully developed.
And they're developing aggressive behavior because they're told in practice, hit them hard. You knock them out. You got to win.
Yeah.
So we see this negative competition.
Right. One thing that you know, I guess is the key is flag football and touch football is boring.
Yeah.
So you rather see someone out hitting each other. And, you know, and again, the harder the hit, the bigger the reaction from the crowd, you know, the more popular you become, you are. And, you know, and these things can result in permanent brain damage.
And another statistic says 1 in 5 high school athletes will sustain a sport concussion during the season. 33% of high school athletes who had a sport concussion report 2 or more in the same year. Multiply that by 4 years if they're playing sports all 4 years of high school. That's a lot of concussions. And lastly, the most staggering statistic says 90% of most diagnosed concussions do not involve a loss of consciousness. So what about the other percentage that was not diagnosed and they did not lose consciousness? That's a lot of brain damaged people walking around, specifically high school students.
I remember in high school I had a friend who played football, and he was hit really hard, and he sustained a concussion. And he sat on the sideline. He was telling me about it, how he didn't know where he was, what was going on, for 10 minutes. You know, he was just out of it. You know, and people trying to talk to him, he saw your face, but he was out of it. So, you know, thank God he was okay afterwards. But, you know, it could have been worse than what it was.
And who knows later in life what type of injuries or consequences have resulted. We don't know.
That is so true.
And this was, that information was from the Daily Mail. And it's going to be on our website, so you can check that article out.
Yes. And the thing is, it's pretty sad because in doing research, we realize that the younger that they are as they're participating in these sports, the earlier the sign of a damaged frontal lobe shows. And the thing is, it'd be best to even abstain from playing these sports in a competitive manner, because when you're being competitive, that's when you're so much more aggressive and you're more willing to damage or hurt anyone else. So we're not saying just cut it all off and don't play it for leisure. You can play it for leisure, but also recreation. Exercise. But be mindful not to damage your brain. Your body is the temple of God, right?
Yeah.
Now, when we think about it, you're just damaging yourself for a moment's enjoyment. We need to think ahead and think about what's going to happen further on in life.
Yes, but not only can you damage the frontal lobe mechanically, but we also have to protect the frontal lobe from diseases as well.
And that takes us to number 2 on our list, as you mentioned earlier, Jared. Now, there are a number of diseases that can lead to a loss of frontal lobe capacity. Now, many of these maladies are potentially preventable. That means you can prevent them from happening, right? So it's a choice you have to make. And, you know, one of those are the stroke. You know, strokes are among the most worrisome, yet they can often be prevented by controlling risk factors such as high blood pressure. We're talking about these diseases right now, how they impact the frontal lobe. And we know how many people suffer from not only stroke, but also have high blood pressure here in America. And, you know, as we were doing our research, we found how high and how prevalent it is. And I found a statistic here from American Heart Association. They're talking about this year, in 2018, right? They say an estimated 103 million U.S. adults have high blood pressure. That's startling because that's nearly half of adults in the United States.
We're not even to 6 months in the new year, which means in order for them to get this statistic, they had to do a survey. So 103 million people have already went to the doctor and been diagnosed with blood pressure, high blood pressure. And what about those people who have not gone and been diagnosed?
And high blood pressure is very common. A lot of people have hypertension. But the thing about it is it inflicts visible frontal lobe white matter damage. That means that if you were to look at an image of someone's brain who has high blood pressure, you can see the damage that it is causing. And also, it can damage your intelligence as well. And so this is why research suggests that only by controlling blood pressure with correct lifestyle habits can such brain damage be prevented. And we want to bring you all right back to the 8 laws of health, which is NEWSTART. These are the 8 laws of health. Because if we follow these things, then we can help prevent and even cure these diseases.
And we like to call them the NEWSTART doctors. And we call them doctors not because we have actual doctors in the studio, but we're following the principles of NEWSTART, which can help cure disease and prevent disease, which is what doctors are supposed to do. They're supposed to teach us how to be intelligent in regard to disease, its causes, prevention, and cure. And by implementing the NEWSTART, it is the best way, the absolute best way to get back on track with repairing our health and maintaining our health. So let's get right into it. And we're going to start with the 2 doctors, which is Dr. Air and Dr. Exercise, to help us improve our brain's blood supply.
Yeah, so someone may ask, what is one way to provide or to protect the brain from frontal lobe damage? And we're talking about those doctors again. And of course, it's by breathing clean, fresh, well oxygenated air.
Amen to that. Now, you're exactly right, Dwayne, because the thing is, it's more than just air quality that could be affecting your mental performance. When you're in a classroom or office setting, we may not realize that most of us tend to take very shallow breaths.
That's right.
And this is one reason why it's said that after 30 minutes or so, we find it very difficult to even concentrate.
Right.
And when we're breathing, in that office space, you're just breathing in the air that other people are breathing out.
Recycled,
so
basically recycled air, right?
It's recycled toxic air. So what do you do in this case? On your lunch break, just take a nice 5-minute walk, take some deep breaths, allow your body to be able to rejuvenate itself with the fresh air that you're breathing.
And there are some people who even already know this. Like if you notice when you're traveling on the airplane, a lot of people wear masks because they know of all that talk. You're just breathing in recycled air. And sometimes you're on a flight an hour or more with people from everywhere. And you don't know
people are sick.
if people are sick and kind of germs they're carrying. Right.
And again, this these kind of things leads right back to the right to the frontal lobe.
Right.
You might even know this. Right. So the question is, Jerby, as you mentioned, shallow breathing. How do we correct our shallow breathing? Well, we want to be very conscious of this. So consciously take deep breaths in periodically, may and will help to counteract this tendency. So let's take a deep breath and out. And do that for a few moments, right? And you'll notice that it'll help your breathing. You're now conscious of your breathing, and even particularly fresh air. So this is where you want to get outside. Right. This is where going outside is very important, right? Not just sitting in that office space, but you want to go outside. As you mentioned, on your lunch break, go outside, 10, 15 minutes, take a walk. Breathe in that fresh air, right? And this will help not only your body, but also the circulation of those blood cells to carry that oxygen to your brain, to that frontal lobe, right? And we also mentioned gardening, again, recreation. You may not be at work. You're at home. Go outside. Do some gardening. Get that fresh air as well as that exercise.
And this fresh air will provide good, clean blood for the brain.
Clean
and
blood.
that's what the brain needs. And you were talking about, we keep talking about office space, but what about the children? That's true. When we were younger in school, we had recess, right? We were able to go outside a certain amount of minutes a day, sometimes twice a day, because they understood the necessity of fresh air and sunshine. And nowadays we see these programs being cut. Children are inside all day long. So it's important for parents, after your children are released from school, give them that 15, 20, 30 minutes outside in the sun, getting some fresh air.
Right.
Take them to the park. Right.
That is so true.
Jerry, you read that. Yeah, I know we were reading this morning, and you
We
brought
were.
out this really, really nice quote.
That is
Go
true.
ahead. I don't want to take your
Now, for me, I actually like to be out in nature. So when I can get a nice fresh breath, that is actually what I do. But there's a quote that I do know of, and it says that reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body. So for our brains, what we need to do is actually breathe that proper amount of clean air so it can bring all the the natural things that we need for our brain to properly be worked.
So reading and breathing is
Reading
going
and
to
proper
both prevent and help the frontal lobe.
Now, next up, we have Dr. Nutrition, and we have been speaking about nutrition extensively on this show. If you are a regular listener, you know that. And we want to re-emphasize again the benefits of a total plant-based diet free from all stimulating foods. Now, what is a total plant-based diet? That means not eating meat, dairy, and those stimulating foods, caffeine, caffeinated teas, sugars, all of these things.
Spicy
foods,
Energy drinks.
energy drinks, because as we eliminate these things from our diet and we partake of healthful, natural foods, it improves the ability of our frontal lobe and our thinking.
Because what feeds the brain is blood. And in order to have the good blood, you have to put good things into the body.
All right. Now, we've talked about some of those stimulating foods in our previous broadcasts. So go listen to some of those. Very informative.
8stepstohealth.com.
Now, this actually brings us to Dr. Water. We've re-emphasized time and time and time again how important water is because the body is made up of 75% water.
A lot of
Water helps to circulate the blood flow and to bring fresh oxygen to the brain. So how much water are we required to drink daily, team?
Half of your body weight in ounces.
Half your body weight in ounces. So let's say I was 100 pounds. I'd have to drink at least 50 ounces of water a day. So that is the best thing to do for your body. And if you don't like water, if it's not really appealing to you, what you can do is what I have done is infusing your water. So some things that I know that are very good is like citrus, such as lemon, put some sliced lemon in there. You can even put some cucumber and some mint, and that will enhance the nutritional value of the water too.
Even a few pieces of pineapple and let that water absorb it.
So good.
Very good.
It's very
and
yummy.
next up, it brings us to Dr. Sunshine.
Number 5.
And we know that being in the sun increases serotonin production in the daytime, which is why it's good for students and people who work in offices to get out in the daytime, because serotonin helps to prevent depression and fatigue. How many of us and how many people we hear say around 3 o'clock, I'm just so drained. I just feel out of it. And that's because you've been in a building since 8:30 in the morning, and you haven't received any sunshine. So it's important to get out, take a break, use your lunch break wisely, take care of your health.
And we're back to exercise, but this time we'll touch on mental exercises that will help challenge your frontal lobe.
That's right. And just as our muscles shrivel up if we do not exercise them, so it is with our frontal brain. So it is with our minds. We have to exercise, stimulate them. And challenging mental tasks will help to do this, maintaining our mental sharpness or even keenness of thought by stimulating the frontal lobe. And we want to do this in a positive way. So what are some of those activities, quickly, that we can do to help stimulate, even exercise our brain cells?
Well, we want to do it in a positive way. Of course, reading the Bible, commit a text to memory every day.
Every day.
Repeat that over and over, claim the promises of God.
Right.
That will help to exercise your frontal lobe.
You can also cook. And those of you who have been following us from day one, we are plant-based eaters. So learning how to transition from an animal-based diet to a plant-based diet, learning new recipes, learning what different fruits and vegetables and how they help the body, particularly the frontal lobe, is a good way to get that exercise in. Reading, studying nature. God gave us nature, right? And the different animals, the different types of flowers as well.
Right. So those are some positive ways and that can increase the exercise for the frontal lobe. And also, it was a study. One study found that if you're imagining an activity that you're about to perform, if you imagine it, it stimulates 80% of the brain circuitry. And that will be used to perform that task that you imagine. So it's not meditating or nothing, but you sit and think about the task that you're about to perform. And then that will stimulate 80% of your brain, activity in your brain. And, and when you're ready to do that task, you will not only do it, but do it well because you've thought it out. You thought it out.
Right.
So it's like if you're going to bake some fresh bread at home, you're going to sit, you're going to read those ingredients, you're going to read the instructions, and then you're going to get up and execute it. And just by doing that, reading through it first and knowing what you have to do, pulling out those ingredients, putting them in order, that is going to stimulate 80% of your brain.
I can attest to that because whenever I sit down and, let's say, write a list or just think about how am I going to get this done, then I know what path I'm taking, and it's easier to put things together. The puzzle pieces, I see the pieces, and I just got to put it together.
So if you're a builder, it's perfect for that.
Exactly.
That's true.
Now let's go back to Philippians 4 and verse 8, because the principles found here teach us what we are to listen to and even read. It says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, so not fiction, right?
Nope.
Whatsoever things are honest, not lies, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, think on these things.
Yes, and Jared, that actually brings me back to a point in Psalm 101, verse 3. It says, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. This is the key point in this text. So as we've been touching on the frontal lobe, we mentioned the music, the things that you read, the things
TV.
that you listen to,
See
what
and
you're
hear.
watching. All of that has a negative or a positive effect on your brain. And we want to glorify God. So this is why he's telling us not to set any wicked thing before our eyes. So if you want to listen in on those broadcasts, go ahead and check out those previous broadcasts that talk more about this.
At 8stepstohealth.com.
And God has provided each one of us with the power of choice to truly choose which way we will take. And in his tremendous power, he has showed us the things that we are to listen to and the things that we are to read. And we need to sit down and seriously analyze our lifestyle. Don't just merely go back into our old way of doing things, but allow God to change us. Romans 12, verse 2. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Not our will, his will.
Amen.
And that brings us to our closing hymn today, which is a scripture song that will sum up everything we have been speaking about. And we pray that you've been blessed by listening to this series on the frontal lobe.
If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affections on things above, not on things on the earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. Ye are dead, ye are dead, ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. Ye are dead, ye are dead, ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God.
Colossians 3:1-3 encourages us to turn our lives 100% over to Christ. And these 8 laws of health will help us to do just that.
Now, Orlando, get ready because we have another event lined up for you. Starting June 3rd through June 7th, we are going to be having practical classes dealing with the healing power of water. We're going to be talking about the ways in which water can help prevent disease, cancer, boost your immunity, reproductive health, constipation, so much more. It's going to be very interactive. There will be question and answers. We will have free groceries, and refreshments will be served.
And these classes are going to help prevent and reverse diseases of the body.
Yes, and it's going to be right here, WOKB 1680 AM, our radio station located at 50 South Clark Road, Ocoee, Florida, 34761. Again, June 3rd through June 7th, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Look out for that.
Free admission. We hope to see you there.
And we thank WOKB Studios for partnering with us once again to serve our community. So we hope to see everyone come out. And remember that our theme is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, 8stepstohealth.com.
All right, Orlando, thank you for joining us. Remember, June 3rd through the 7th. We'll talk to you next week. God bless.